The crystal champagne flute felt cold in my hand, a stark contrast to the boiling rage simmering just beneath my calm expression. My son, Mark, stood beside his new bride, Ashley, their faces glowing under the opulent chandeliers of the ballroom. She leaned in and whispered something in his ear, her eyes flicking over to me with a look of pure disdain. A moment later, she glided over, her $1,000 dress rustling like dry leaves. She didn't even bother to smile. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low and sharp. She led me to a quiet alcove, away from the smiling guests. "I don't know how to say this politely," she began, failing immediately, "but my parents are here. My father's business partners are here. This is a high-class event and frankly you don't fit in. Your dress, your everything. It's an embarrassment. I want you to leave." I just stared at her, my mind a sudden perfect blank. I looked over her shoulder at my son. He watched us for a second, then deliberately turned away to laugh at something one of his groomsmen said. He wasn't going to defend me. He was going to let this happen. Ashley's perfectly painted lips curled into a smirk. "Don't worry," she added, as if offering a kindness. "We'll tell everyone you felt ill. Just go quietly." I looked from her smug face to the lavish floral arrangements, the 5-tier cake, the string quartet playing softly in the corner. I saw the ice sculptures and the open bar, the waiters in tuxedos serving hors d'oeuvres. And then I looked back at her. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. She didn't know that every single petal, every note of music, every drop of expensive champagne in this room was being paid for by me. And I was about to cancel every last cent. Why would a mother do this to her own son on his wedding day? Because this wasn't a celebration of love. It was the final invoice for a lifetime of being treated like an ATM, and their payment was officially overdue. To understand why I didn't scream or cry or make a scene, you have to understand that my son's betrayal wasn't a single shocking event. It was the culmination of a 25-year education in being invisible. From the moment Mark was born, he was the center of our universe, the golden child. His father, my ex-husband David, treated him like a prince, and I was cast in the role of the royal treasurer. My only purpose was to fund the kingdom. I wasn't a person, I was a provider, a function, an endless, renewable resource. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs when Mark was young. I put myself through night school to get a degree in business administration, studying at the kitchen table after I'd put him to bed and cleaned the house. I started a small medical billing company from our damp basement, working until my eyes burned, fueled by cheap coffee and the desperate hope of giving my son a better life than I had. And I did. He had the best of everything: private tutors, brand-name clothes, a new car the day he turned 16. He never had a part-time job, never had to worry about a bill, never learned the meaning of the word no. David encouraged it. "Don't worry, Mark," he'd say whenever our son wanted some new gadget or a ski trip with his friends. "Your mother will handle it. That's what she's good at." They were a team, and I was the silent partner who did all the work. They never asked about my day. They never noticed the exhaustion etched onto my face. They never celebrated when my little basement company finally started turning a real profit. They just noticed that the river of money flowed a little faster. When David and I divorced, the dynamic didn't change. If anything, it got worse. With his father no longer acting as a middleman, Mark came directly to me for everything. Rent for his downtown apartment, car payments, student loans I'd co-signed, and was now paying off myself. He was a grown man with a bottomless list of needs, and I was the mother who had never learned how to stop giving. So when he announced he was engaged to Ashley, a beautiful girl from a wealthy family, a tiny, foolish part of me hoped this would be a turning point. But then came the inevitable follow-up. "We've started planning the wedding, Mum," he'd said, his voice full of entitlement, "and we want it to be perfect." Absolutely perfect. I knew exactly what perfect meant in their vocabulary. It meant expensive. And I knew exactly who they expected to write the checks. A week later, they presented me with their vision. We met at a chic downtown bistro where the water alone cost $12 a bottle. Ashley slid a thick, leather-bound binder across the table. It was filled with spreadsheets, fabric swatches, and glossy photos torn from bridal magazines. She did all the talking, her voice crisp and authoritative, while Mark sat beside her, nodding in blissful agreement. "The venue is the Saint Regis Ballroom," she announced. "It's a non-negotiable. The floor-to-ceiling windows, the history, it's just us." The rental fee alone was $30,000. Next was her dress, a custom gown from a designer whose name I didn't recognize, but the price tag of $18,000 was unforgettable. They wanted a 10-piece band, not a DJ. They wanted a videographer who used drones. The flowers had to be flown in from Holland. The cake was a 7-tiered monstrosity from a celebrity baker. And the honeymoon was a 3-week, all-inclusive stay in an overwater bungalow in the Maldives. She presented the final budget on a neatly printed spreadsheet. The grand total was $115,000. She pushed it across the table, tapped a perfectly manicured finger on the bottom line, and looked at me. It wasn't a question or a request, it was an expectation. My son, my golden boy Mark, just sat there beaming, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated entitlement. He hadn't worked a real job in his life, and here he was, co-signing a demand for a sum that would take most people years to earn. In that moment, looking at their smug, expectant faces, something inside me that had been cracking for years finally shattered into dust. But on the outside, I smiled, a warm, maternal smile. "It looks absolutely perfect," I said. "Of course I'll take care of it." Relief washed over their faces. They had won again. "I just have one condition," I added, keeping my tone breezy. "To keep things simple and to maximize my credit card rewards, let me pay all the vendors directly. You just approve the contracts, send me the invoices, and I'll handle the payments. You two shouldn't have to worry about the boring financial stuff." Ashley's eyes lit up. Less work for her. "That's a fantastic idea," she said. Mark leaned over and gave me a rare hug. "Thanks, Mom. You're the best. We knew we could count on you." Oh, they could count on me, all right. They were so busy counting my money, they never thought to count the cost. The months leading up to the wedding were a blur of invoices and payment authorizations. I paid for every deposit, every fitting, every tasting menu. I signed every contract. On the wedding day itself, I felt a strange and profound calm. I wasn't the nervous mother of the groom, fluttering about and hoping everyone was having a good time. I was an investor, calmly waiting to see the final performance before liquidating the assets. I sat in the front pew of the church, wearing a simple but elegant dress I had chosen myself. I smiled, I stood, I sat on cue. I even managed a convincing tear when they exchanged their vows. A tear for the son I once loved, the little boy who had vanished long before this day. At the reception, the scale of their greed was breathtaking. The ballroom glittered. Everything was exactly as they had demanded, a monument to their selfishness built with my money. I was seated at a table in the back, tucked away near the service entrance with some of David's distant relatives. Ashley's parents, a pair of frosty socialites, swept past my table without so much as a glance. I saw them whispering to Ashley, their faces pinched with disapproval as they looked in my direction. That's when my new daughter-in-law marched over. She pulled me into the alcove, her fingers digging into my arm. "I can't believe you wore that," she began, her voice a venomous whisper. "It looks like you got it at a mall." "My mother is having a fit. Do you have any idea who is here tonight?" She gestured wildly at the crowd. "These are important people. This is the start of our life, and you are lowering the tone." I just stared at her, letting the sheer audacity of her words wash over me. "I want you to leave," she said, her voice dropping to a cold, hard command. Make up an excuse. Say you have a migraine. I don't care. Just get out of my wedding. My eyes darted past her, searching for my son. He was standing not 20 feet away, watching us. He saw the anguish on my face. He saw his wife's cruel sneer. Our eyes met, and in that moment, he had a choice. He could have been a husband, or he could have been a son. He chose. With a tiny, dismissive shake of his head, he turned his back on me completely and raised his glass to a friend. The last thread of hope I had for him severed. "Okay," I said softly, my voice devoid of any emotion. "I understand." I turned and walked toward the exit, my steps measured and deliberate. I didn't look back. The show was over, and it was time to bring the curtain down. I didn't rush. I walked calmly through the glittering hotel lobby, my heels clicking softly on the marble floor. The doorman, thinking I was just stepping out for some air, tipped his hat to me. I gave him a polite nod. I got into my car in the underground garage, but I didn't start the engine. I sat in the silent, concrete tomb, the muffled bass line from the 10-piece band thumping faintly through the floor above me. My band, my concrete, my silence. There were no tears, no shaking hands. The woman who cried had been left behind in that ballroom. I was someone new now, someone who collected on debts. I took out my phone, its screen glowing in the darkness. I had a special folder in my email inbox labelled Wedding. Inside were copies of every contract I had signed and every invoice I had paid. I tapped the first one, the St. Regis venue. The contact was for the events manager, a man named Julian. I pressed the call button. He answered on the second ring, his voice professionally cheerful. "Julian Vance." "Mr. Vance, this is Sarah Miller. I'm the signatory and payor for the Miller wedding in the Grand Ballroom." "Ah, Mrs. Miller. Yes, I hope you're enjoying the evening. It's a beautiful event." "I'm sure it is," I said, my voice flat and cold. "I'm calling to inform you that my authorization for all payments related to this event is hereby revoked." Effective immediately. The silence on the other end of the line was thick with confusion. I'm sorry, Mom. Revoked? The event is in progress." "I am aware," I continued, speaking slowly and clearly, as if to a child. "The American Express card on file is mine. The signature on the contract is mine. I provided the authorization for the charges, and I am now rescinding it. That includes the final balance due at the end of the night, and I will be initiating a chargeback for the initial deposit on the grounds of services not being rendered to my satisfaction." I could hear frantic typing on his end. "Mom, our agreement is with your son and his bride." "Your financial agreement is with me," I corrected him. "Your contract for payment is with the person whose name is on the credit card. That is me. My son is merely the guest of honor at a party that is no longer paid for. You have about $97,000 worth of unpaid services happening on your property right now. I suggest you rectify that. Have a wonderful night." I hung up the phone before he could form another word. I took a deep breath. Then I scrolled to the next name on my list, Exquisite Catering. I smiled. I was just getting started. My finger tapped the screen. Opulent Blooms. The owner answered, gushing about how stunning the arrangements looked in the candlelight. "I'm so glad you like them," I said. "However, there's been a change of plans regarding payment." "I'm revoking it." I let him stammer and protest before I gave him the same line. "Your financial dispute is now with the bride and groom. I suggest you go inside and speak with them." I hung up and immediately dialed the next number. The band leader was loud, and I could hear the music thumping in the background. I had to repeat myself twice. "You're cutting off the funds." "Now?" "Lady, we're in the middle of a set." "And it's the last set you'll be playing on my dime," I said. "The contract states final payment is due upon completion of the event. As the financier, I'm informing you that the funds are no longer available. You can either pack up now or play for free." There was a string of curses, and then the line went dead. I pictured the music grinding to a sudden, awkward halt, leaving 150 guests in stunned silence. Next, the caterer. This one was satisfying. He was a pompous man who had been incredibly condescending during the tasting. "But the prime rib has been served. The cake has been cut," he screeched into the phone. "Then you should probably get your staff to collect the plates before the guests finish," I said, a hint of ice in my voice. "You have a $25,000 bill that someone needs to pay, and it won't be me." As I continued down my list, the videographer, the lighting specialist, the company that rented the ridiculous ice sculpture, my phone began to vibrate violently. A constant, frantic stream of incoming calls. Mark again. My ex-husband David. An unknown number that I guessed was my new nemesis, Ashley's mother. I declined every single call. I let the angry, desperate text message previews flash across my screen and then disappear. They had made me invisible for years. Now I was making myself unreachable. I saved the wedding planner for last. She was the conductor of this whole orchestra. When I told her, she didn't believe me at first. She laughed. Then, as the reality of my tone set in, her voice rose to a panicked shriek. "What do you mean you cancelled everything?" "The venue manager is walking over to the bride right now. The band is packing up. What am I supposed to do?" "You're the planner," I said softly, before ending the call. Plan. My work was done. I dropped the phone into my purse, turned the key in the ignition, and drove out into the cool, quiet night, leaving nothing but a financial mushroom cloud behind me. I didn't drive back to the small suburban house they all knew, the one I kept as a prop for my role as the struggling, dutiful mother. I drove for 20 minutes, heading up into the hills that overlooked the city, a place where the houses were hidden behind long driveways and ancient oak trees. I pulled up to a discreet steel gate, which slid open silently to reveal a low-slung modern home made of glass, cedar, and stone. My home, the one they knew nothing about. The story I'd allowed them to believe, that I ran a modest little billing company, was a lie of omission. That little company had exploded 15 years ago. I saw a gap in the market for specialized healthcare software, developed a platform, and then sold that platform to a tech conglomerate for a sum with 8 zeros. The world saw me as a savvy CEO and a respected consultant. My family saw me as a walking, talking bank account with a conveniently modest balance, just enough to fund their lives, but not enough to seem truly powerful. I kept it that way on purpose. I wanted to see if, one day, they would love me for me, not for what I could provide. The wedding was the final, definitive answer to that question. Inside my real house, surrounded by quiet elegance and art I had chosen myself, I poured a glass of wine that cost more than Ashley's shoes. I sat on my leather sofa, looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the glittering city below, and finally unsilenced my phone. It was a digital explosion, 42 missed calls, 67 texts. I clicked on the first voicemail. It was Mark, his voice tight with confusion and panic. "Mom, what's going on? The venue manager is trying to give me a bill. Call me back." The next voicemail, recorded 10 minutes later, was almost unrecognizable, a raw scream of fury. "You! How could you do this? Ashley is hysterical. Her parents are threatening to sue us. You've humiliated me. You've ruined everything." I listened to one from my ex-husband, David. "I don't know what stunt you just pulled, Sarah, but you're a monster. To do this to your own son on his wedding day. You've always been selfish, but this is a new low. Not a single message asked if I was okay. Not a single one acknowledged what Ashley had said to me. They weren't angry that I had been hurt. They were apoplectic that the cash machine was broken. I took a slow sip of my wine, a real smile touching my lips for the first time all night. I hit select all on the voicemails and pressed delete. They were just noise now, and I finally had peace and quiet. Their dream life lasted for 3 days. That's how long it took for them to find me. On Saturday morning, a taxi pulled up my long driveway, and my son and his bride spilled out. They looked awful. Ashley's mascara was smeared, and her expensive clothes were rumpled. Mark looked pale and thin, aged a decade by stress. They stood on my manicured lawn and stared at my house, their mouths hanging open in disbelief. The sheer scale of my hidden life was the first blow. I met them on the stone porch, holding a mug of coffee. I did not invite them in. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice even. "What do we want?" Ashley practically shrieked, finding her voice first. "We want you to fix what you broke." "We are getting letters from lawyers. The venue is suing us for the full amount. The caterer, the florist. It's over $100,000. You've ruined us." I looked past her to my son, who was still gaping at the architecture. "Mark, is that what you came here to say?" He finally met my eyes, a pathetic, pleading look on his face. "Mom, you have to help us. We can't pay this. Ashley's parents won't help. They're furious." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Let me see if I understand," I said, setting the mug down. "For 25 years, I have paid for everything: your education, your cars, your apartments, your vacations, your hobbies. I paid off your student loans and your credit card debt. I funded this wedding, an event where your wife informed me I was too embarrassing to be seen. And now, after all that, you've come here to demand that I pay for the consequences of your own actions." I turned my gaze to Ashley. "You wanted a high-class event, free of embarrassing middle-class mothers. You got what you wanted. I left, but the money is mine. It goes where I go. You cannot have one without the other." "So, no," I said, my voice dropping, becoming as hard and cold as the stone beneath my feet. "I will not be fixing this. This is your bill. This is your mess. The Bank of Mom, the institution you have been withdrawing from your entire life, is now permanently closed. The free ride is over." I pointed toward the waiting taxi. "You need to leave my property, now." For the first time, they looked truly terrified, not of the bills, but of the finality in my voice. They finally understood that the game was over. They had cashed their last check. Defeated, they turned and shuffled back to the taxi, leaving me alone in the quiet morning air. The door to my old life had just slammed shut, and I was the one who had finally bolted the lock. I heard through a distant cousin what happened next. The story of the disastrous wedding became a legend in Ashley's social circle. The vendors, furious and unpaid, sued them. Unable to afford a lawyer and with no income to speak of, they were buried in debt. Ashley's parents, mortified by the public humiliation and the sudden appearance of a massive bill, washed their hands of the whole affair. Their perfect, high-class marriage crumbled under the weight of reality, and they divorced in less than a year. The last I heard, Mark was working a retail job, living in a tiny apartment, finally learning the value of $1 now that he had so few of them. He sent a few more emails over the years, filled with rambling apologies and thinly veiled requests for money. I never replied. My ex-husband, David, tried one last time, sending me a multi-page letter detailing all my failings as a wife and mother. I didn't read it. I simply threw it on the fire I had burning in my stone fireplace and watched the pages curl into black ash. My life, on the other hand, had just begun. The money I had allocated for the wedding, the full $115,000, I donated to a local charity that provides scholarships for first-generation college students. I took the trip to the Maldives myself, staying in the overwater bungalow they had picked out, and I thought of them only once as I toasted my own reflection in the sunset. I expanded my business, traveled the world, and reconnected with friends I had neglected while I was busy funding my son's life. I learned that my value wasn't in my bank account, but in my own peace of mind. I had spent a lifetime being a provider, a function, a resource. Now I was simply me. They asked me to leave their party, not realizing the party was mine. By kicking me out, they didn't banish me, they liberated me. They were left with the empty, echoing ballroom and a pile of bills, while I walked out into the quiet night and into the rest of my beautiful, peaceful, and prosperous life. They thought my money was their power, but my true power was the ability to finally say no, and in doing so, I said yes to myself.